Hey, I'm Russ, and tonight we're on chapter 4 of The Body Keeps
Keep this
Score.
the score. Yes. So welcome everybody. We're excited to talk with you. We actually have a little extra guest tonight. Cotton, my puppy, was so sad that I'm leaving and going out of town this weekend, and so he just needs all sorts of attention, which is interesting because actually animals can be really helpful in recovering from hurt and injuries. They have an ability to be able to love and just kind of nestle in you, and it can be really calming to the brain.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going through something traumatic, we can have a lot of anxiety and stress, and so Cotton might be hanging out with a lot with us. Let me make sure that is my phone is turned off. It's probably going to be Russell. Russell's phone's going off, not me. But so, one of the first things that the book started out with, Russell, that we kind of want to talk about was the example of 9/11.
Yeah. And I think, for those, it's been long enough that we can say, for those of us that were alive during 9/11, so of course, September 11th, 2001, um, I think everyone that lived during that time can remember exactly where they were or what they were doing. And that's kind of a trigger of trauma, of severe trauma, where you can remember the event.
You get stuck,
Yeah.
where your brain gets stuck in the event. So what can happen in that it kind of talks about is that you can remember everything, but it also went on to talk about the other gentleman in the book where your brain gets stuck. And so we're going to kind of talk about both of those a little bit. But the first one, I loved how it brought out and brings over the fact of like that children's brains or our brains have the ability to, if we are in a good, healthy life and we have our needs met and everything like that, we can go through trauma and do okay with it. It doesn't have a lot of after effect. But if we don't have our attachment needs met, or we've been through multiple traumatic events, or we didn't have a good home life growing up, it can really play into a traumatic event and affect how it affects us.
Yeah.
So this boy, it talks about how he was in a good home that was doing the best and everything, and everybody survived. Nobody died from 9/11. And so he had created a picture of what he saw, which was the airplane going in because he was really close to it, going into the planes. But at the bottom of the picture, because he'd seen all the people jumping out of the building, which is why we turned things off, he created a trampoline. And he goes, that's for the people to jump on. Cotton really wants to get to Russell, so we might have to let Cotton get over there. And so I love that trampoline part. Is that you or is that me?
I'm just getting some notifications.
I'm just gonna try to make you quiet. Sorry.
Yeah, people are asking if we're
live. We are.
We are. So go ahead and tune on.
So it's really helpful, and I'm gonna hand Cotton over. He's fallen in love with Russell. That imagination of a trampoline really helped this kid to process and problem solve. The problem was people were falling out of the building. We need to problem solve that.
Yeah.
And his problem solve, using his imagination and his ability, is to put a trampoline in there. That solves the problem. It makes everything better. And that is actually part of the processing that we go through and everything like that, is that our ability as we're processing, whether it's talking, EMDR, neuro feedback, anything like that.
Oh, he's fine now. I just had it.
Anything like that is that it helps us to be able to process, using our imagination to be able to think and think outside the box or think of something different. By having that bilateral stimulation and things like that really helps our brains to open up to new ideas and how to think about something, how to look at something different.
Yeah. Well, I think we know that, children react to how the adult is reacting.
Yes. So if I am in a traumatic event, so when I was in my car accident, I was really blessed that Dallin wasn't there, right? But when I was rear-ended, Dallin was in the car, and I had lost Dana. I had been rear-ended, and this was I'd been through so many car accidents of getting hit. And so I'd been rear-ended. I'd been in another car accident. I'd been rear-ended. I'd actually been sideswiped. So I got rear-ended again, and I just emotionally just lost it. And so my child is sitting there freaking out and everything because I was freaking out. And I was at a state where I was newly widowed. It was still within the first 6 months that all these accidents were happening. I was widowed. I was dealing with the single parenthood, all these different events that were going on. And so I had boom, 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 boom. I didn't have the capability anymore to be able to manage things. I didn't have the capability to be able to handle things. And I reacted really poorly. And that affected Down for quite a while. He kept on, every time we got in the car, "Are you okay?" Like, da, da, da. And he was just a little, but in his look, because he was 2, not quite 2, but he was like, "Mama, okay? Mama, okay?" Every time we got in the car, "Mama, okay? Mama, okay?" Because he was so worried about me. And so one of the things that Down took away from that is that when I get emotional, he started to self-soothe me. He tried to calm me, because that's what I would do with him when he was stuck. And so it can really affect how your children will look at trauma, how they will, not just trauma, but events that happen in their life based upon how we. So if we freak out, if we are in anxiety, they're going to do those things.
Well, I can remember when we were kids, if you spilt your glass of milk, it was a big trauma, big, my parents would overreact, and then, so when I had kids of my own, if a glass spilled, we just calmly wiped it up, didn't comment on it, just wiped it up, and then continued with dinner, and, didn't make it into a big event.
Well, and that's, again, it's really important, because had you made it into a bad event, they would have made it into a big event. The book also talks about that when our children's brain, it really kind of locks on about that first grade, around the age of 7, 9, and it starts to lock in, and then it starts to have big advancements in brain development and things like that. And so at those ages, think of the fundamental things that you're learning and discovering from your parents and how they react and things like that can catapult you further in life about things. For example, I grew up in a home where we didn't talk about emotions, right? And so I learned at a young age, you just, and I still at times will avoid crap like crazy because you didn't talk about things. You didn't discuss things. As I went through therapy and things like that, now we talk about things. Now we discuss things, even to the point, Down's got autism, but Down is a point where he'll be like, "I'm frustrated and I don't know what to do with my emotions. I don't know how to handle it." And so we're beginning to change those things. One thing I want to bring up here, and we didn't say really hi to anybody, so hi! Welcome to those who are here. But one of the things I wanted to bring out was that as we manage and deal with our things, that it might take a couple generations before we see the aftermath. Like me getting better, it takes Down's generation for me to be able to see that. And I still don't do that perfectly, but Down's generation is going to get better. Down's going to get, like, we benefit generations after we learn from things. And so it's not always quick and fast.
Well, and then, so here you're, and this is a kind of, I think, where people need to come together. So, like, I go back to the example, if milk was spilled, it wasn't a big deal, but as your children grow and then they get married, and something spills, well, my daughter's not overreacting, but maybe her husband is, and so now they've got to come together and say, "Hey, it's no big deal." So that starts that generational communication again, doesn't it?
It really does, and it really starts us to reset where we've been and what we're going through. And so it's really great that I guess what we're saying is you don't have to be stuck where you're at.
Exactly.
With the right work and the right help, you can move forward and progress.
And my wife and I were lucky. We had very similar experiences growing up, very similar family dynamics, and so when we got married, it just kind of meshed well. There wasn't a lot of you do this, I do that, and so it was a pretty easy mesh.
Yes, and again, you learn and grow from that, right? You learn how to mesh, and it takes work. It isn't an automatic, you come in a relationship and, hey, how do we mesh, right? It was a work in progress. All right, so where do you want to go next, Russell?
Let's talk about the brain and the functions of the brain and how the brain develops.
Okay, so we've got the reptilian brain. So we've got the stand that connects to the reptilian part of the brain, which is basically the basic part of our brain. Like when I reptile, I think dinosaur, those are the things like eating, breathing, those basic things that we need. And that part of that brain is really set to make sure that we have our basic needs. So if your trauma is something that your food or something is affecting that part of that brain, oh, that's scary. Like you not having food or having food taken away or using against you or for you because like that happens. Like people use something that you need,
Yeah.
those basic hierarchy of need, Maslow's hierarchy of needs
Exactly.
against you, and that can be more traumatic because you have to have that foundational. You have to have that basic: how to eat, how to drink, how to poop, like all those foundational things. And when those are taken or used against you, it can really affect things.
Yeah.
And so the brain kind of starts from the bottom and it grows up and builds up, right? And as it's building up, we have the hippocampus, that's the part of the brain that's the energy part. It's the part that gives you that, hey, I got to react and everything like that. It's the part that helps with that energy side. It also helps with just keeping us stable and balanced.
I was going to say we need that part of the brain because it can help us react to positive things and it can help us react to negative things, right?
Yes. And so knowing, and again, we can get that screwed up, right? Our emotions can really affect things and get things screwed up that we think, again, because we've been trauma, that something's trauma when it's not.
Yeah.
But that emotional side is what helps us to think things through. And so we can also go the other direction where we overthink things. I was actually talking to somebody today and we were talking about a situation and we were talking it through. And I was like, what got said to me or was like taken away from what I said was not all what I meant and was not all what was actually said. But because of this other person's things and stuff like that, miscommunication happens. And I think it's really important to understand that sometimes a miscommunication between two friends or relationship or whatever it is, your husband or wife, can happen not because it's true miscommunication, but because that part of your brain's being affected and it just isn't working right? Like how you interpret something isn't how I might have said it. Like I might say bananas and you're over there sitting there going, what the hell is she talking about? And for me, bananas is just my word. It's my reset word, right? So I say banana or I say banana hammock. People come in my office, I will say it all the time. It's my way to kind of reset my brain and try to get it to snap back on. But you're sitting there going, banana what? What's she looking for? But because we just talked about it, you now understand that. But imagine me miscommunicating or saying something different or hearing something different because my brain has been affected by what I've gone through, that I emotionally and thinking and processing and all that stuff gets so mixed up that I'm not processing it really what's at present.
So I can see two people having a very, say we go to someplace, let's say Disneyland, just for
let's go to Disneyland. We're going to Disneyland.
Some people love it, have a great positive experience, and some people have a negative reaction to it because maybe they had a not so great experience at Disneyland the last time they went. So you can have something that is great and bad to different people. And,
and it can be the same experience. Like, so if me and you, same time, go to Disneyland, we're together and you can hate it and I can love it, or I can hate it and you can love it. And we walk away with completely different stories about the event because, again, how my emotions affect things will interpret how I look at things, right? So if I come at something, I'm already anxious and I'm already having struggles, and then I go through something that's like a car accident, I'm going to play that off in a different situation because I'm already emotionally being affected. And my emotional regulation, again, gets affected by what we go through and how we go through. And again, it can be used for us or against us, right? Our emotions can be something that says you're good, you're safe, or it can be going crazy saying, oh, you're not good, you're not safe, even though you are, right?
It's like I was talking to a lady today. She was, she's a widow. She was remarried. Her husband was a widower, remarried. They made it for 10 years and then they decided they couldn't make it work anymore. But she was telling me that they'd go on a trip every one of their anniversaries. This is the second marriage. She would look forward to it and plan it and be excited, and then he would be miserable the whole time. So I'm thinking that his first marriage, that maybe the anniversaries weren't such great experiences for him, where the anniversaries were a great experience for her in her first marriage.
Again, they're both experiencing it, but look at how their history and their past can influence I call it filters. It's kind of like the filters you can put on your glasses. Some people's glasses will, they can put those sunglasses on them, or they sunglass already and stuff like that. And that's a filter. It affects you. I was watching a video on TikTok of a bride who bought her new to be husband. He was colorblind and he bought the colorblind glasses. And he started crying because he was like, this is what it's like to experience color.
Yeah.
Like he didn't know that what you're wearing right now is purple and blue. He didn't know that I was wearing, or that like he couldn't see those colors. There were certain colors that didn't. And again, I've learned, because I have a friend who is colorblind, that they begin to memorize what people will tell them what a color is, and they begin to memorize that because it does have a hue.
Okay.
They just don't see it as blue. They don't see it. It's a different color to them. It's a different hue. But they learn the hues and what they are.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, it affects those things. It's our stability and our balance, and it really God's like, you quit petting me. So it can really affect things. And I think that was one of the things important is, again, as Russell was bringing out, it's like that fight or flight part of the brain, and understanding how the brain is affected and how we can affect how we process it and how we take away from it. How we will be able to interpret things can be influenced by our experience, but it also can be influenced by where we're at in life and our experiences. Like where I'm at, one of the things that experience that happened with me in regards to my work that I've done is I'm a talker now. And like I just said earlier, like my way growing up, we talk, but you don't talk about things, right? You don't talk about emotions. And I think now I can sometimes be an over talker. Blame it on my ADD brain.
Yeah.
But I over talk because I came from a place where we didn't talk, right? And it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying my parents we were doing the best we could. We didn't know. We didn't know that we might need to talk about. It's not that we didn't talk about emotions, but we just didn't talk about emotions, right? Like we didn't process that, and so that part of my brain didn't get really developed. And again, this part of the chapter brings out again how we get stuck. Yeah, I think that's something that we should really.
Yeah, so let's talk about how do we get unstuck.
Well, that's a good question, but I think it's first important to talk about the fact that we get stuck.
Okay, let's talk about that.
So what can happen is we can get stuck at the time and event of where we're at. So it talked again about Vietnam, and that these guys were back to when Vietnam happened, and it was great that they were giving out this gift, but he realized that these men were stuck. They were stuck in their trauma. They were stuck in the moment of these events happening, and they weren't able to really, they were getting older, they were working jobs, they were doing all these things, but their brains were stuck. And I don't remember if you guys remember the video. I think it was the first video we talked about. Maybe it's the second one. I talked about that I suck at spelling. I suck at grammar. Yeah. Why? Because in my young childhood of the trauma that I went through, my brain got stuck. It was too busy surviving to show up to learn at those things. And I have noticed as I've worked through my things that sometimes, and you might have seen this, you've seen somebody, you're like, dude, they're acting like they're 4. Yeah. Why are they acting like they're 4? Their brains get stuck in that trauma. So if their trauma was happening at age 4, right, they're going to get stuck in that. And so their experience, when your experience happens, whether it's 18, 20, wherever that is, or whenever they start, you can get stuck in it. And your brain literally gets hijacked, and you do show up like you're 4. Yeah. You do show up like you're still that teenager going through that. And it's hard. And I realized that, again, going back to my events and trauma, there were many times that I was like, looking back, I'm like, dude, I really acted like I was, not the age I currently was. And it was really hard because I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that the traumas that I went through, big or small, or car accidents, losing my husband, to open heart surgeries, things like that, that these things really affected things. Yeah. They really affected my ability to move forward. They affected my ability to progress, and yet at the same time I was progressing, and so this didn't make sense. Like I was passing school, I was first grade, second grade, third grade, so how could I get stuck? And that it's like the trauma hijacks your brain, and it literally it gets stuck. It gets stuck in the emote. It gets stuck in that event, and again we go back to the PTSD and reliving that and the flashbacks. It makes sense how your brain can get stuck, and it's like the old music recording vinyls where they get stuck. and they get stuck. And so our trauma can get us stuck in life. It can limit our progression, and it can limit our abilities. One of the things that research has shown is that, like with ADD and ADHD, guess what? Sometimes it's not really ADHD or ADD. It's actually kids who've been traumatized, and their brain can't continue to develop.
Okay.
And so they get stuck in this, and they found out that working through the trauma, some of their signs of ADHD and ADD can go away. Now, not everybody is that way, but in regards to the brain and because of trauma, you can get stuck.
Yeah.
And that stuck can get misdiagnosed, right?
Yeah. So that gives up a good question. Is so you can be stuck.
Yeah, or the brain gets blocked.
But
right?
you can still progress through life. You can still get married, have kids, hold a job, but you may not be as happy and successful as you could have been.
Yes.
Had you addressed those issues at the time.
Yeah. And had you been able to address it and work through it and process it and done therapy, whatever that type is, like, again, we're talking EMDR, the eye movement desensitization reprocessing, or neurofeedback, or yoga, or just talk therapy, or whatever, or mix, or art and things like that. Any of those things to help you process it, it will help you to be able to move forward and progress. But when you get stuck, there's parts of your brain that literally can't keep developing.
And I'm just shooting from the hip here, but is that why some people may turn to substance abuse, is to deal with that stuckness, or is that a totally different?
I don't know. I think it's different. In my experience of working with substance abuse, usually substance abuse gets started because you hurt so bad and you're trying to numb and get away from the pain.
Okay.
But that's something we'll have to look into. It's possible. I haven't done. I've stepped away from addiction work, and so I haven't really looked into that. But it might be. It might be part of the reason, or that again, can doing drugs traumatize you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So you, or alcohol, or whatever the addiction is, and so could you get stuck in that? Yeah, at that time in that event. So yeah, it's so one of the things, and again, another example of this getting stuck is going back to that example where we think we always are, like the bear's coming out first. Yeah. The bear's gone, it's not there, but our brain thinks it's still coming out. And so we're still responding as if a bear's standing here, even though there's no bear, right? Yeah. So that's another show of getting stuck, right? Is that you're always stuck in thinking or feeling like you're in that event, even though you're no longer in that event.
So it's like when my mom would give us tuna noodle casserole when we were kids. We loved it, and we'd eat it, and there's not any left. And now the thought of it just makes me want to vomit.
That's me and liver and onions.
So does that mean I've moved beyond that traumatic event?
Probably. That's a good one. No, it's funny you said that. I'm like, yeah. Somebody was asking, like, what's the one thing you can't eat that you had to have? Just get liver and onions. Yeah. So again, it's being able to move and do something to protect yourself is critical factor in determining whether or not the horrible experience will have lasting scars. And so that's a really important thing that I wanted to talk about was that our inability to be able to protect ourselves, our inability to be able to move can actually leave us scars.
Yeah.
So think about, for example, say somebody is getting a gun pointed at them, and there's no, like, they're backed in the corner, guns got in the, they can't protect themselves in any way. That's going to leave a really big stuck. That's going to leave a really big scar, because part of our movement is being able to move.
Yeah.
Part of our, and so what can happen in the brain that's really kind of a drawback is, we talked about fight, flight. What happens when that freeze happens? Yeah. And so that freeze can really magnitude a trauma, because your brain just got froze. And what happens when we're frozen? Have you ever been around somebody who's catatonic or frozen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No movement, right? And so, again, we were just talking about that a really important part of not being scarred is being able to protect yourself, being able to react. Yeah. And so when your body freezes and doesn't react and can't, ew.
That's pretty tough, yeah.
Ew. It's super hard. And so that can be really difficult and really traumatizing on your body. So that's another key important thing is when you're looking or talking to somebody who's been traumatized or they've gone through it, if they don't have a way to protect, if they didn't have a way to protect somebody else in the event and things like that, it's another level to their trauma.
Is that why we may find touch and the basics? Is that why we may go back to those basics and find those hard to deal with again, like touch and sleep and having, eating regularly and having some of those issues come back again?
Well, think about like when you get stuck or when you freeze, you kind of lose an inability to do things.
Yeah.
And so again, your body, especially when it's reliving trauma, like past, it's having flashbacks and stuff like that, it's so busy reliving that stuff that we don't have time to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
An example of this was when I was going through open heart surgery with my husband. One of the things I didn't have time to take care of myself was my diabetes. We'd gotten pregnant, and we found out that my husband was struggling, so we needed to go back into another open heart surgery. And we went back into another heart surgery, and I was so busy at this time. Dallin was, I think he was 8 months old because it was in August, so he was about 8 months old. He was just a baby, so I had a baby. I had my husband going through open heart surgery. Do you think I was able to show up to take care of my diabetes? Hell no. Right? And so I couldn't take care of those things. It was like I was so busy in the events and trauma that I couldn't take care of me. And we ended up having a miscarriage. And again, blessing that we had miscarriage, because I was not taking care of myself or my diabetes. I was so busy. But it was like the trauma of the event and heart surgery and everything, like, really made me unable. Like, I couldn't get beyond making sure I was doing the basics. But the problem is because in society, we take care of everybody else and ourselves. I couldn't take care of the basics for myself.
Yeah.
I could take care of it for my son. I could take care of it for my husband, but I couldn't show up for myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's another part of what can happen is we go through these events and we think that we aren't worth taking care of ourselves. We don't realize that we can take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we end up, again, those things we don't do.
Yeah. Because I've noticed, like, people that go through, we'll use the death of a spouse as our example. I've seen it go two ways. Either people sleep a lot or they can't sleep at all. But they can still, like you were just saying, I can still get up and fix dinner for my kids. And I guess that's because it's such maybe a knee-jerk reaction at that point where it's 5 o'clock. I know I got to get dinner on for the kids.
Well, and it can motivate you. That was one of the things after losing my husband. Dallin was my motivator. Until I worked on myself and I became my own motivator. Dallin, and even at times now, like when I struggle or I'm having a rough time, Dallin is my motivator because I know he has to be fed, he has to be cared. Cotton has to be fed. So one of the things I want to go back to is I want to go back to that bottom top, and I wanted to read from the book.
Yeah.
So your first part of your brain, everything is, it says the most important job of the brain is to ensure the survival, even under the most miserable conditions. Everything else is secondary. So that answers your question is why we can't do stuff. Yes, my job is to be surviving. So if I'm having this post-traumatic stress or I'm reliving these events or thinking I'm still in it, all the other things are secondary because my job is to survive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then everything else is secondary. So in order to do that, the brain needs to, one, generate internal signals to register to our body that it needs food, protection, rest, sex, shelter, those things. Then two, to create a map of the world to point us where to go to satisfy those needs. 3, to generate the necessary energy and actions to get us there.
Yeah, that's right. I'm laughing because I just want to make sure that my hand is petting the dog. I'm not doing anything else.
And sometimes we're just funny.
I just want to clarify that. I don't know why I had to. Jesus told me to clarify that. So.
God bless Jesus. It reminds me of, we were scrolling here, but there was that Ellen show, and she called me a lady. She was like, I love Jesus, but I love the drink. So we've got to generate us the necessary energy to take care of those first two needs, and then to warn us of dangers and opportunities along the way, and then adjust our actions based upon the requirement of the moment. And since we human beings are mammals, creatures that can only survive and thrive in groups, all these imperatives require coordination and collaboration. The psychological problems occur when our internal signals don't work, when our maps don't lead us where we need to go, when we are too paralyzed to move, when our actions do not correspond to our needs, and when our relationships break down. Every brain structure that I discuss has a role to play in the essential functions as we will see in trauma, and can interfere with every one of them.
Yeah.
So it's really important for us to remember that everything can be affected because of what we're going through.
Yeah, and that's when we go back to that reptilian brain. That's why a newborn cries when it's hungry, uncomfortable. It's the same reaction because that's how it knows how to.
And sometimes in trauma, people go back to those basic, like they can't talk. They go back to the simplest things of trying to get things, like, because it works. You can get a need met.
Yeah.
By pointing. Sooner or later, people are going to act.
Yeah.
But because your brain and everything's so affected, it can really affect those things. And again, those bodily functions are essential needs to us, but they're easy to neglect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, again, as I work with some people and in trauma, as they are dealing with things, again, it's so easy for them to start to neglect taking a shower. It's so easy for them to start to neglect eating, drinking, and things like that. That's why when a questionnaire we ask, what's your current weight? Have you had adjustments in weight? What's your sleep schedule? Do you eat? Like, we ask those questions because it's also a sign of where you're at and how you're doing, because it's so easily to forget how to do those, even though they're the basic things that we have to live. So yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
So I want to check here. The what flora of our brain is something that we need. I just want to just kind of double check. Usually I saw comments, but it doesn't look like I'm seeing anybody. And so, oh, I see Carolyn there. Carolyn, if you have any questions, go ahead and type it in. It should pop up for us. In fact, I actually think, Caroline, let me see here. Hey, can you see yourself?
Hi, yes.
All right, but we can hear you. So this is a cool thing that we just learned. Can we answer anything for you?
No, I find this interesting, though. I can see it. You can reflect on it in my own life. I'm learning.
Well, and this is why we're doing this. It's actually been interesting as we've had the setup and stuff coming forward. I've had people like, I finally bought the book. We really I had a moment today with a friend, and it was a spiritual moment, but in it was just that a testament of this is what we need to be doing, and we're in the right path, and we're directing, and we might not see the current effects right now, but this is going to have a waterfall effect, and that people are learning and growing. And I think that's so important because I go back to how I went through my trauma and I didn't know differently. I didn't understand. I didn't, but at the same time, I'm grateful for what I went because it helps me be so good at what I do. But this is what this is about, is to help you learn and to help us to have discussions because we don't talk about it. Let's be honest. So we're glad you're here, and it's glad we started this new way of doing our Facebook Live. So we're glad to know that you clicked on that, and that actually allows us to see you and interact with you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything, Russell, that you thought? I just want to look through here in my notes here. Give me just a moment, but anything you can think of?
Excuse me. Well, as we've talked about, the brain is kind of our emotional security,
Uh-huh.
and so it can give us a lot of joy, and it can, as we've been talking about, it can keep the score of things that have traumatized us, and it's that same brain that holds on to the trauma that's going to help us deal with the trauma and move on. So
yeah. And it affects things. It's actually one of the things that I was just going to remember to bring up is that our frontal lobes is the part of our brain, but not always, that stops us from doing something embarrassing or stops us from getting hurt.
Not always.
But guess what? Not always. We don't always eat every time we're hungry.
No.
We don't always kiss somebody when we want to, right? We don't always go and have an intimate moment just because our body is saying we want to have an intimate moment. And so it's, again, we've got to remember that even though your body might have a need to get met, we don't always meet that need.
Yeah.
And so it might say to protect, but we don't always protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Or we might not know how. Again, think about a little kid, or think about somebody who's going through an event, and in that moment, you don't know how to respond.
Yeah, you just don't know. Yeah.
There's no, like, I say with my my parents, kids don't come with toilet paper that you can just pull off and be like, okay,
Yeah.
Monday at 9 o'clock, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And so it's a learned thing, and we don't always get it right. And another thing about interesting is our effects on anger. When our anger part of our brain is going and affected and reacting, we can get overreactive.
Yeah.
Never. Russ has never seen me overreact. When I get angry, I one of the things I've learned, especially from couples therapy and everything, is to take a break.
Yeah.
And so sometimes somebody will say something, and I might not say, "Hey, let's take a time out," but I might say, like, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." And that's my way of trying to say I need a break, because in my anger, I'm not always nice. I'm not always kind, because my anger is trying to protect. It's trying to keep me safe. And so sometimes we people, and I think this is really important to remember in anger, is that anger shows up as a way oftentimes to protect us. And think about that. Think about what happens when somebody's angry at you. Do you want to get close to them? No, right? So when I use my anger, or when somebody uses anger at me, I have to remember, oh, that's hurt showing up.
Yeah.
That's protection. They're trying to keep themselves safe. Anger's trying to get me to step back.
Yeah.
Trying to get me to not get close.
Yeah, that's a great realization.
And it's, I think it's something that we don't understand, because we're like, why am I angry? And I've, in the last few months, really have spent a lot of time. Oh, it actually started last year when I went through some stuff at the beginning of January 2021. I realized that my anger was a way of trying to express I was hurt, but trying to get things to stop.
Yeah.
I went through some EMDR work, and I was like, why do I yell at my kid? Why? And in the process of the EMDR work that I'd done, I realized I was using anger to get the behavior to stop. I didn't know how to get, because he was autistic and ADHD, and I didn't know how to get the behavior to stop. And so anger, and it worked. And so I used it, even though it wasn't the good, healthy thing. And I think that's another thing that's important to realize with things, is that anger is, we use it, but it's not the healthy way to use things, right? And so when somebody shows up in you anger, remember there's probably something else going on. There's more than what we see. There's more than that going on. Again, it talked about the smoke alarm and identifying, and sometimes our body will give really strong triggers, and we need to listen to those. I think one of the things I've also would say I've learned with my clients that we really do a lot of work on is listening to your body. Sorry, Carolyn, I'm going to turn you, I've left you playing here for a second, but one of the things I was going to say is that with our body is that, what did I just say, Russell? We both scrolled, and it was a good one. It was about anger. And so with my son, and that behavior and stuff, it's important to remember when people are showing up in anger that other things might be going on. There's more than what we realize. There's more behind it. And so I really spent a lot of my time with that. And this was the part that I was just saying about that I'm getting back to now, my brain remembered, was I really do a lot of work with my clients to get them to listen. And for that, I use what's called IFS, Internal Family Systems. And there's some part works and stuff with that, but it's about listening to your body. One of the things I've learned, anxiety is a way of thing that's trying to get you to act. Anxiety comes up because it wants action, and it might not need the action, but it wants action, right? It wants something. And so one of the things is, it's important, and this is where mindfulness, yoga, things like that come in. It's really listening to your body. Your body is giving a warning system. Listen to it. Even if you get it wrong, listen. Listen to your body. Listen. And again, sometimes listening doesn't mean action. I didn't say act. I said listen. And so listening to your body is having a conversation with yourself and saying, hey, I gotcha. I heard you. I know we're nervous. I know we're nervous about. Like I was talking again with my friend Kevin today, and we were talking about that I'm nervous about this weekend. And I was like, why am I nervous? And trying to process that through. And again, what in the process I discovered is it doesn't mean I have to act. I just need to listen that there's a part of my body that's nervous, and I need to hear it, and I need to acknowledge that to my body. Go, I gotcha.
Yeah.
I heard you. We've got this. We're good.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing I think that's important is that can get screwed up. It can play with trauma, and we can listen to it and then not act it. It just, again, the point that we're making is this gets convoluted.
Yeah.
This little bit that we're talking about, can you see how it gets so messed up and crazy for people? And we're dealing with these people who are going through these events on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And there's this history. There's more to the story than what is realized. There's more going on than we're even talking about. And I think it's really important to just understand that. The other thing is we want to take care of our responses.
Yeah.
So the book talks about it as being controlling the stress response, the watchtower. It's really important to understand and talk it through and to acknowledge to your brain that just because it's saying anxiety doesn't mean we have to act on anxiety. Yeah. One thing they learned in my trauma work was emotions lie. Emotions lie. They tell you you're in love when you're not in love. They tell you that we're anxious and we're not safe when we are, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so it's really important that we understand that it's affected by that. And it really affects that, and we need to take care of that watchtower. That's why we need to get the therapy. We need to process things. We need to work through things because it helps take care of that watchtower. The watchtower, just like it says, sits there and watches and observes things. Its job is to be aware, right? It's to give the signal to let you know something's coming, right? If we don't take care of that, that signal can be going nuts, or it can be completely turned off, where we don't get it anymore. Yeah. So, there was more that we kind of covered, but we're running out of room. So, anything?
No, I think we've had a great conversation tonight. Remember that when this video hits Facebook, to like and share.
Yes, and I was just checking to see if we had any questions. So I want to give it a moment here to say if you want to watch. But again, comment, everything like that. I do, again, if it seems a little squirrely today, I have been recovering. I got bronchitis, and that was why our video got canceled last week. But we have it planned. Yeah. So next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we'll be discussing Chapter 5.
Yeah, and I'm a little tired because I've had to work 3 days in a row. So
Russell actually has to work in life, and so now he's getting tired.
A little tired, yeah.
So we welcome you guys to join us. We're thankful that you're here. We really try to keep these about 30 minutes. We went a little longer today, and that's okay. But again, if we miss something, we will cover it next time, and we're glad that you came.
Yeah,
thanks.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.